Let's welcome the Honorable Joe Neguse, U.S. House of Representatives, Boulder, Colorado.
Well, hello, everyone. It is so great to be with you virtually for the Beyond Pesticides Forum. I want to thank the School of Medicine at Mount Sinai for co-convening today's events and for our local leaders from Boulder, Colorado, from Vail, as well as many scientists, community organizers, nonprofit members, business leaders, and farmers from across our state of Colorado who have participated in the Beyond Pesticides Forum, providing incredible insights, expertise, and ideas. And of course, to everyone participating in this important forum from across the country. And a big thank you to Beyond Pesticides for continuing to engage in this incredibly urgent and important work to protect our communities, our states, our country, our environment, and our earth. Over the last few weeks, you've heard from many experts, from community members, from advocates about cultivating healthy communities. That's why we're all here today. We all deserve to breathe clean air, drink clean water, enjoy the outdoors, and thrive in healthy, sustainable communities. Yet, we know that today there are more threats to our environment than ever before. Dangerous and intense wildfires that are burning our forests, threatening our communities, a biodiversity crisis that is impacting our ecosystems and our wildlife, dangerous chemicals that are harming consumers, farmers, kids. We have a plastic pollution crisis in our oceans, where it's estimated that 8 million tons of plastic enter our oceans every year. The climate crisis has impacted our environment, our communities, and our future. In recent years, we've also faced intense floods and long-term droughts that threaten our way of life, the resilience of our communities, and ultimately our economy. The health of our nature is inextricably linked to the health of our communities, the health of our economy, and the legacy that we leave for future generations. And that's why it's absolutely critical that we move forward on policy that addresses these crises, that tackles climate change, that seeks to restore our lands and our communities, our environment, and ultimately our planet. In Congress, I chair the subcommittee for national parks, forests, and public lands. And we're very much hoping to turn the page on these issues, propose bold solutions, and tackle these consequential challenges that we face as a society and as a planet. While we've faced great challenges in Colorado due to climate change, in the midst of that, Colorado communities are leading boldly on tackling the crisis and ensuring a brighter future for the next generation. Our state, as I'm sure many of you are well aware, boasts world-class universities, research centers, and environmental experts and scientists, many of you among them. Our state boasts being a leader in advancing environmental and climate science, and we're ready to implement the solutions of the future. Our office has worked very hard to bring that same ingenuity, the same dedication and passion to the policymaking here in our nation's capital. I recently introduced a resolution, which some of you may be aware of, that calls for a national strategy on biodiversity to guide our nation to a healthier and more harmonious future. Our lands are facing an unprecedented biodiversity crisis that has been driven in large part by human activity. We're losing too much land, too many species, too much beauty with each passing day. The scientific studies around this issue, all the empirical data that I've seen, have made it very clear that as we damage ecosystems and exploit wildlife, we're also accelerating climate change and polluting our air and our water, problems that affect human health and disproportionately impact communities of color and Indigenous people. The resolution that we've introduced would encourage government agencies to work together and pursue a full range of actions to tackle this issue from all sides. We need to think about biodiversity as a crisis of the environment. In our resolution, we put forth guidelines, including climate adaptation strategies for biodiversity, a rapid building out of renewable energy, measures for equitable access to nature, and of course, the importance of leading internationally in agreements like the Paris Climate Accord. As part of our effort to protect our communities, we also, in the last Congress, worked alongside my dear friend, former Senator Udall from New Mexico, on landmark pesticide reform legislation to protect consumers, to protect farmers, and ultimately to protect families. I drew my inspiration to sponsor this bill from the city of Boulder and the countless people across Boulder, across the second district that I have the humble privilege of representing, and all of Colorado who hold grave concerns over the historic and dangerous lack of oversight on pesticides, a lack which, as you all know, leads to real harm on our environment and our biodiversity, as well as negative health effects for our communities. We're fortunate to have throughout Colorado's 2nd District, of course I'm biased, but some of our nation's top experts in the environment's delicate and intricate systems, in organic and regenerative agriculture, and in preserving and furthering healthy people and communities. For years, these experts have been warning us of the frivolous, profit-driven, dangerous pesticide oversight system, if you can call it that. We use their expertise today to, for the first time, reform pesticide registration and regulation from an environmental perspective, a viewpoint that has been delayed for far too long. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but every year, the United States uses over 1 billion pounds of pesticides, nearly 1/5 of worldwide use altogether, right here in our country. Once they're approved, pesticides often remain on the market for decades, even when scientific evidence overwhelmingly shows that that pesticide is causing harm to people or to the environment. No longer can we allow the regulations put in place to protect us to fail so wholly in doing so. Nor should we allow the EPA to continue putting the interests of the pesticide industry above the health and safety of people and our environment. I'm proud to be championing the Protect America's Children from Toxic Pesticides Act, as we did in the House of Representatives last year, which banned the most harmful, or rather proposed banning the most harmful pesticides, and sets forth regulations to ensure safe registration practices to protect the health and the safety of our environment, agricultural workers, and each member of our community above the profits of the pesticide industry. While we believe that each of these proposals will make a lasting impact for our communities and for our lands, they cannot be enacted in isolation. And that's an important point. It's time for bold action for our planet and for our future. That much is clear. I am so grateful for the leadership from President Biden in turning the page and really pushing on climate action in a bold way and trusting the science once again. He has done just a tremendous job and proposed through the American Jobs Act historic actions to battle the climate crisis, to address the biodiversity crisis, without going through the laundry list of items that the president has proposed. As I'm sure many of you are aware, his jobs plan calls for 500,000, 500,000 chargers for electric vehicles by the end of the decade, calls for building and retrofitting 2 million homes that'll be energy efficient, getting rid of every single lead water pipe in America, doubling the funding for public transit, providing additional funding for the National Science Foundation, and making sure that at least 40% of the investments go to environmental justice communities. With President Biden and Vice President Harris in the White House, with their leadership, it is clear we have entered a new era for climate action in the United States. Now, some of you may not know this, but the American Jobs Act, the proposals, the programs that I just described, actually follow many of the recommendations that we made on the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. We proposed a series of recommendations in our climate action roadmap just this time last year. It was after we had spent over 2 years holding hearings with the leading scientists and experts from across the globe to visit with them about what is necessary to ultimately save our planet, building out those important conversations, including a field hearing in Boulder, Colorado, my hometown, where we heard from this community, from local leaders and from scientists. Those principles that ultimately we settled on as a committee include building a cleaner and more resilient transportation sector, including major investments in zero-emission vehicles, something our office has been leading on, rebuilding infrastructure with an eye towards climate change and climate resilient impacts, something that's critical for Colorado communities that have been devastated by wildfires and floods, cleaner and more resilient electricity sector, upgrading homes, as I mentioned, and critical buildings and businesses for resiliency and efficiency, and investing in our water infrastructure, and of course, ensuring a disaster-safe power grid, and so much more. The clean energy jobs boom will also ensure cleaner air and water for families across America. The bold investments called for by the American Jobs Plan have the potential to create a more just and cleaner future for generations to come. So now is the time. Now is the time for us to go forward, to invest boldly in the clean energy jobs of the future and a modern infrastructure that will mitigate the worst of the climate crisis. And I would be remiss if I didn't say how grateful we are that the president's plan also throws support behind our plan to create a reimagined 21st century civilian climate corps, which is pretty exciting stuff. They say with great challenges also come great opportunities. To address the unemployment rates in our communities, to make historic investments in wildfire suppression, mitigation, recovery, to restore our lands and our communities, we've proposed the 21st Century Civilian Climate Corps. It's a bold proposal, in our view, that will put hundreds of thousands of Americans back to work in our public lands, doing incredibly important work, wildlife, habitat preservation, and so much more. Ultimately, helping restore our lands and our communities. In short, we're taking a page out of FDR's playbook, and our hope is that this plan can make it across the finish line. And of course, we're excited that President Biden has included our plan, or the proposed $10 billion fund from our plan with Senator Wyden when he unveiled the American Jobs Plan. At the end of the day, the work we do here in the United States Congress, from the 21st Century Climate Conservation Corps to all of the proposals I mentioned regarding climate action, to the steps that we need to take to address the biodiversity crisis in America, all of it ultimately is for our children, for the next generation. I have a young daughter. She turns 3 in just a few months. She doesn't yet understand the scale of these crises or the profound impact that humans can cause on our environment if we don't act, but she does understand the taste of snow in Colorado in her mouth, right? The beauty of leaves, the shape of stones and flowers, what it means to breathe fresh air and help walk our dog Teddy outside. Her simple awe of our earth is one that we should keep in mind. Certainly I keep in mind as we craft solutions and as we consider the earth as it is that we seek to protect and the damage that will be done if we don't take effective action. The future we want to live in is in our hands. And so, of course, the responsibility falls on us, all of us, to help build that brighter future, to follow the science, to protect our communities. And so with that, I want to say again how grateful I am to work with each of you and how grateful I am for the work that each of you are doing, the important conversations that you all have been engaged in, like this one, over the course of this conference, because that work is so critical. So thank you for allowing me to share a few words and helping you close out this incredible event. And please keep in touch as we work towards solutions to meet these challenges, to tackle these many crises. We're here to partner, to engage, and to lift up your incredible work. Thanks so much.
What do you say to people who are not hopeful because they see the paralysis in Congress and don't think that we can achieve these changes? What advice do you have for folks to help engage them in the political process?
Well, I'd say two things. First, democracy is not and has never been a spectator sport. It's our success as a democracy is contingent on citizens being active participants, and that means engaging your elected officials. It means being involved in shaping public policy. It means being an active participant in our democracy. And I certainly hope that each and every one of you will participate in that way. And I suspect that that's the case, given the fact that you're attending this important conference. In terms of losing hope, or whether or not folks should have hope, given the paralysis in Washington, D.C., which of course is certainly true. There is a lot of dysfunction here in the nation's capital, as I've quickly learned here during my short time in the United States Congress. I would just say to you that America, Martin Luther King Jr. had a great quote I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which is that the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. And I couldn't agree more. Our country has experienced a series of challenges and crises before, and we've always risen to the occasion. And it has taken hard work and grit and perseverance and commitment to each other, but we generally always end up rising to the occasion, doing what is necessary to move the ball forward. And I could spend hours on end going through the litany of all the accomplishments that our country that we've made, our democracy has made over the course of the last 230 some odd years. It isn't to say that there aren't a lot of challenges that, of course, we face today. As I've mentioned, we face a lot of them. Many of them are existential. And yet I'm optimistic that, if we do what we've done in the past in terms of putting aside our differences and coming together to develop a consensus to solve a consequential challenge that faces us, I think we'll be just fine.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Neguse. You are a true leader. You're an inspiration, and we deeply appreciate all that you're doing in Congress.
Thank you.
So
Thanks
much.
for having me. Thank you all so much.